To another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we have Ben Parker joining us from CardinalSportsReport.com and also a contributor to Stanford on 3. Ben, it's great to have you on to talk some Stanford ball. And, there's definitely a lot to be excited about with them, given the pretty solid recruiting class and the recent hire of Tavita Prichard as their head coach.
Yeah, no, it's very, very happy to be on here. It's an interesting kind of time for Stanford with Frank Reich being the interim head coach for the year, and then Tavita Prichard coming in as the new head coach. It's a very interesting time to be following Stanford football and covering them.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you just give the audience just a little bit about you as well and where to find your work?
Yeah. So I'm the publisher of CardinalSportsReport.com. You have it perfectly written there below, which is nice. And I run the that is the Stanford site for the On Three Rivals network. So On Three Sports over the summer acquired Rivals.com. So obviously Berkeley and studied philosophy there, and so it's been kind of interesting being a Cal grad and switching over to covering Stanford after covering Cal for a while. So that's created some interesting conversations, and some people are still haven't gotten over the fact that I cover the Cardinal, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the Cal listeners that may or may not be watching don't give you too hard of a time, but nevertheless, it's great to have you on to
Thank
talk a
you.
little Stanford ball. And it was announced a couple weeks ago that Pritchard takes the job as head coach at Stanford. Obviously we can talk a little bit about his background, with the Commanders and his stint as offensive coordinator, even though we can kind of debate in terms of how much influence he really had on the offense. But nevertheless, Ben, when you kind of look at this hire and you kind of get the general feeler reaction from the Stanford community, what's the overall atmosphere like? What was your general thoughts on the hire?
Yeah, it's sort of mixed. I think that on just kind of start with kind of the negative side of the before I pause. Is I think there's concerns among some people just due to Pritchard's lack of head coaching experience. Never been head coach before. When he was offensive coordinator under David Shaw, it's kind of perceived that he took kind of more of a backseat role in that case, given that David Shaw was the one calling the plays and everything. And then he left to the NFL as quarterbacks coach, which certainly boosts his resume of the Washington Commanders, but ideally you'd think you'd want somebody that's a bit more seasoned and more experienced to be a head coach. So I think that there's a lot of people out there that are concerned and just worried and question the hire. On the positive side, there's a lot of people that are excited about the hire because Pritchard is a Stanford alum. He's a Stanford guy through and through. He has, spent a lot of time, not just as a player at Stanford, but was an assistant coach there for a long time prior to being OC under Shaw. He coached quarterbacks, he coached wide receivers, coached a bunch of different positions. Even spent a little time as a defensive assistant. So he brings a lot of experience and understands both sides of the ball, having coached both sides of the ball. And this is, and I think the other thing too is like him being an alum, him being a close friend of Andrew Luck's. He is somebody that really loves Stanford and wants to build it into a powerhouse program again. And the reality is I think if Stanford is going to get back to the top, you're going to want somebody that really is invested in the place, and Pritchard certainly is that. So that's kind of both sides of it.
Yeah, and the big positive about Stanford too is, I mean, you can go back to the earlier tenure David Shaw or Jim Harbaugh, or even if you want to go way further back, Tyrone Willingham too. What all those guys have in common is they found ways to win at Stanford. So despite the academic rigor of Stanford, they're going to give you the resource. They're now presumably are going to have a lot more resources given the
Mhm.
donation, and obviously now you're in a pretty solid spot now, just given how open the ACC is. But they're coming off a 4-8 year, and especially at least one of my takeaways from watching Stanford is I remember watching that Week 0 game versus Hawaii and kind of just thinking to myself, if they're having this much trouble moving the football, it could be a long season. And kind of fast forward to the end of the season. And it really seems like they kind of progressed in a number of different ways. I mean, they have some really good quality young guys like Elijah Brown, for example. Micah Ford is a guy that I think is really fun, and hopefully they find a way to keep him. But Ben, when you watch when you watch Stanford progress throughout the season, what were some of your takeaways from that? And most importantly, what do you think they can improve on and learn from as well?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they progressed a lot as the season went on. I think that look at Hawaii as an example. I think if they were to play Hawaii again in a rematch, I think they probably would beat them, given how close that game was. I think that and Hawaii's a good team, so I'm not trying to like,
Yeah,
but I just think like they made progress. Now you could say maybe Hawaii made progress. So who knows? Maybe
yeah,
Hawaii would beat them because they both improved. You don't know. So up front, offensive line, right? Like that's been a major problem for them over the last few years. And when they gave their quarterback Ben Gobranson time, he's able to make some good throws, and then same with Elijah Brown, right? Other thing too was like you mentioned Michael Ford. When they rushed for over 100 yards, 150, like they were a good team. Michael Ford had a 150 plus yard game. I think it was against Boston College he rushed against, and Cole Tapp had a big game against. I can't remember who it was, but he had in the big game. Escaping me, but that one of the games they won. Basically, when they won games, they ran the ball well, and so I think that's something they can take going to next year. Is like if they can continue to run the ball well, and then give Elijah Brown the time he needs, assuming he's the quarterback next year to start. It certainly feels like that's where they're leaning, but we'll see what the transfer portal brings them. They can do some good things. Other thing too is like defensively. Um, they're big. Where they really hang their hat on was their red zone defense is top 25 in the country. They were a really, really good red zone defense. They were tough to score on in the red zone. They also were just a good run defense in general. Um, and it was very much a bend but don't break defense where they allowed teams a lot of red zone opportunities, but once they got in there, that's where it got tough. So I think that they did a good job of establishing the run, playing sound defense. And I think the win over Cal, I think that really kind of shows you kind of where they're kind of headed, where they ran the ball well. They scored two defensive touchdowns. I mean, so a lot to be proud of defensively and running the ball. Just got to get that passing game going a bit more and really kind of improve the offensive line. And if they do those things, then they have a chance to be even better next year.
yeah. Because even when you think about some of the quarterbacks that have came through Stanford, right? I mean, Ashton Daniels was a guy that I think was super fun to watch, and for
Yeah.
me, definitely a big what if he could have stayed. Then I think of guys like Kevin Hogan and Davis Mills and Tanner McKee. So I mean, needless to say, I mean, they definitely know how to develop the right quarterback in the right situation too. Especially just David Shaw is just a pretty solid offensive mind too. Now he's with the Detroit Lions as well. But Ben, when you kind of look at this as well, I mean, they also just like you mentioned too, they snapped a 4-game losing streak to Cal too, and
Yeah.
to finish that off and build a little bit momentum going into this offseason is definitely a huge positive.
Oh yeah, no, it's huge. Obviously, if you were them, you probably wish you could have just like end of the season after the Cal win, not have to play Notre Dame, right? Because
Yeah.
Notre Dame just kind of smoked them. But no, I think that I think that one of the big things for any team, any sport, is it's all about how do you do relative to your expectations coming into the season, right? And I think for Cal, I think kind of the big um, I think for them, the expectation was to have an improved season from last year, which would have included, which meant after four straight 3-9 seasons, necessarily meant getting at least 4 wins, and ideally one of those 4 wins would be over Cal, and they accomplished that. And so I think that for them, I think the fact that they were able to get that fourth win over Cal sent a message that they've had an improved season. And so I think for them, honestly, like I mean, obviously they'll tell you like they were hoping to do more than win 4 games, but realistically speaking, like considering the circumstances, you fire your head coach over, and you bring in an interim, like to go 4-8 and have an improved record and beat your rival, like and reclaim the axe, like it's a good year for them. Anything else would have been gravy at that point. So I think they should be happy with how the season went, even though if they'll tell you they expected more. But I think internally, like they probably are like, yeah, good year.
That's like, but everybody says, "Oh, we always need more." Or, "Oh, we're going to do better
Right.
too." Because I mean, Frank Reich was probably sitting on his couch when he found out that Troy Taylor got fired, and he's like, and he probably is like, you know what, I'll run it back for my good friend Andrew Luck. But fortunately, he is, it's my understanding with the reports that I've read is that he will be kind of a resource for Pritchard and Andrew Luck moving
Yes.
forward. So that's definitely being able to have that veteran presence on the staff. I think is going to be something really positive for him, especially, kind of moving into this new era of Stanford football.
Yeah, no, it's huge to have Luck still. It's huge to have Reich still involved. I think we'll see what that looks like. It's a senior advisory role, so like I don't know what that means exactly, but certainly, yeah. I mean, and yeah, I mean, having Reich still involved is huge. And really, this all comes. I think this all comes down ultimately to just like trusting Andrew Luck, right? Like, he's the guy that made the decision to make a coaching change. He's the guy that made the decision to bring in Frank Reich. He's the guy that decided to, roll with Tavita Prichard. So I think this is a situation where you just got to trust Andrew Luck and trust the process and see what happens. You know.
Exactly. And, fortunately, they've, at least financially speaking, have got a pretty solid thing going. $100 million they've raised since Andrew Luck has been there. So there's obviously some believers, but, if
Yeah.
you want to transition over to the recruiting cycle, National Signing Day, Stanford got a total of 25 commits. And as I was kind of reviewing their recruiting class before we talked, I was really pleasantly surprised to see how many recruits they're able to get. I think they were ranked 57th, I think, last year compared, and then this year they're 36, which
Yeah.
to me seemed super impressive. So, what I was going to ask you is, can you just elaborate a little bit on some of the high points of who they got, and also who do you anticipate them trying to go after in terms of the transfer portal as well?
Yeah, just first to touch on the transfer portal real quickly. I think that they'll definitely look to add a quarterback in the portal. That'd be my expectation did last year. I think that, while there's belief in Elijah Brown, you don't want to necessarily just automatically assume he's your guy. So I think running back will be a thing. Quarterback will be a position they'll look to fill. I also think offensive line will be a position they'll look to fill. Another position to watch out for will be cornerback. I know that from what I've been hearing, senior cornerback Colin Wright, he's a redshirt junior, but he'll academically
Yeah.
senior Colin Wright is going to look to test the NFL draft waters. Is expected to do that, so there's no guarantee he's back. So he'll look to go to the draft. So I think that yeah, I think cornerback, offensive line, quarterback. And then I don't know what the market looks like for kickers in the transfer portal, but they already kind of have one. But like, you never know. Like, if there's a really good kicker out there, they might bring one in for competition purposes. And yeah, I would say those are probably the key positions, like offensive line, corner, and quarterback. And then also I think two wide receiver as well. They'll probably look to get a guy. So that's probably what you're looking at in terms of transfer portal needs. Now, as far as like the high school recruiting is concerned, the first bit I wrote an article on my site about kind of 5 key takeaways. And so I don't want to necessarily give the premium content away for free on YouTube necessarily, but one
Exactly. Make
yeah,
them
but
pay for it.
yeah, they can pay for it, but
Yeah.
one. I mean, but obviously, listen. I mean, one of the big guys was Lasai Jackson, 4-star cornerback, out of Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. What made that significant was I don't know when the last time was that Stanford landed a high end cornerback recruit, but it's been a while. Because like Colin Wright when he committed was like a 3-star recruit, like a guy that kind of grew into an elite type of corner. But I mean, Lasai Jackson, 4-star corner, absolutely huge that he's stuck with Stanford. Um, Given that Georgia Tech was trying to flip him, Auburn was trying to flip him. He actually visited Georgia Tech versus Pitt as opposed to visiting the big game against Cal. I wonder if maybe he feels like he maybe should have gone a big game and touched the axe or something instead of watching Georgia Tech get smoked by Pitt. But no, I mean, so there was like, I mean, I think there was a vibe for a while that Lasai Jackson was like not going to stick with Stanford, and that maybe his verbal commitment was more about because I'll tell you one of the things at Stanford in terms of recruiting that's really huge is like parental pressure. There's a lot of parents like if you're like I talked to Mike Montgomery, the basketball coach, about this back when I was covering Cal at a Pac-12 media day. We were just talking, and one of the things he mentioned was when you recruit to Stanford, you really sell the whole family on the Stanford experience. It's like a big thing. You sell mom and dad, right? So like you want so like, but there's increased. There's more cases of like parents like, which is good. Like ultimately, it's your kid's life. They just made the decision, but I think there was some concern that maybe he committed to Stanford because of like parental pressure or something, and but he internally wanted to go elsewhere. But so we weren't sure what he was going to do, but he ultimately stuck with Stanford. Um, and so Lasiah Jackson's definitely your headliner. Uh, so Lasiah Jackson, that's number one. Number two is they flipped a four-star wide receiver. Well, let's see, ESPN 247 had him as a four-star. Rivals gave him a three, but industry ranking four-star. I always get confused with all these stars they're doing now.
Yeah.
But four-star wide receiver, Zion Robinson, we'll just say it that way. He was committed to Michigan. Uh, and you know he's got to be feeling, for those that have followed the Michigan story, he's got to be feeling really glad he flipped out of that situation. So
Right.
they flipped him. They flipped him on signing day. Zion Robinson. There was intel that I received and others were receiving. This was coming. So he flipped. That was big. So they got Zion Robinson flipping him from Michigan. The other big flip was four-star athlete Dre Pollard, who was committed to Washington. And for those that know what athlete means, athlete just means you can play either offense or defense. Um, those are usually guys that are typically athletes, are usually either wide receivers or defensive back. That's usually kind of what that means. But Stanford is looking to have him play either at wide receiver or somewhere in the secondary. We'll just see where that is. I think it's more likely he ends up playing safety for them. But head coach Tavita Prichard made it clear to him that they are open to seeing how he does at either wide receiver or safety or corner or whatever. So but getting Dre Pollard to flip from Washington was big. So they got a couple flips, and then the one kind of guy they had that was on flip watch ended up sticking with them. So that was big. Another guy they got that was huge was a three-star offensive lineman, um, Ammon Alexander, who was he's Latter-day Saint LDS, as am I, and so I know all too well about how so many LDS kids want to go to BYU and get that Brigham Young University experience out there in Provo. His family, I think his dad played for them. And so there was a lot of speculation that he was going to commit to BYU. But towards the end, as signing day approached, I got intel that indicated he was likely going to sign with Stanford, actually. So that was big. And that was also huge, too, because they lost another commit to Texas. They lost a commit to Texas. Make sure I get his name right. I believe it was Caden Shearer, I think. Yeah, Caden Shearer. Make sure I get this right. There's so many kids I keep track of. Caden Shearer. I mean, I know the name. Yeah, Caden Shearer is how you say his name. Yeah, so Caden Shearer was a long time committed to Stanford. He flipped to Texas. And so there was a need there at offensive line to fill that. They got that with Ammon Alexander. So, I mean, overall, I mean, and then other guys too. I mean, up and down the line, they also got a quarterback, a guy they flipped away from Vanderbilt, not on signing day. He actually committed to Stanford a few days before signing day. Michael Mitch Jr. out of Riordan High School in San Francisco, California. So he was a guy that had visited Stanford like 5, 6 hour times, but he was committed to Vanderbilt. And so they were able to sign him. He's a three-star guy, but there's a lot of potential around him. And so that already gives them a quarterback that can come in and compete for a starting job potentially, or at least down the line. So yeah, no. I mean, you said it. I mean, there's a really good high school recruiting class. And so for them at this point, it's just about gap fills in the transfer portal. And if they do that, then they'll have had a good offseason recruiting wise. So looking good.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm really glad you touched on the offensive line too, because one of my takeaways from watching Pritchard's press conference was he emphasized how much they really needed to beef up on the offensive line. Because especially if you watch some of those games really, kind of beginning, middle-ish of the season, there were definitely some moments where they were just getting absolutely bullied there. So I'm definitely really excited to see that they, definitely emphasize that in terms of high school recruiting as well. And the last question I'll ask you, just to kind of wrap this all up, how do you how do you anticipate Pritchard filling out the rest of his staff in terms of any names out there that you've heard, or just in terms of schematically speaking, what do you think he'll do differently with his first tenure as offensive coordinator compared to now being head coach if he were to call plays?
Yeah, so he is planning on calling the plays. He said that at his presser. I'm not sure you caught that, but he said that. So, schematically, we'll just kind of see. It's sort of a mystery to me, honestly, because what's hard is he going to keep from David Shaw, right? His offense, right? Because he was OC under him. So that's kind of the big question mark, I think, in terms of like what they're going to look like. As far as like coaching staff is concerned, um, it sounds like I don't want to get into specifics on that, but I think there's gonna we'll just say there's gonna be a mix of guys. Some guys from the current staff from last year are gonna stay, it looks like, and then other guys are going to leave. So we'll just kind of see how that looks like. I don't want to like necessarily. I honestly have not really gotten specific names,
No, it's not
which leads
TMZ.
me to
It's not TMZ. You're good. This isn't TMZ.
yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly will be interesting to see what he does. But I honestly haven't gotten any like specific names. But I think we'll just see a mixture of some of the guys sticking, some of the guys leaving. I know that Andrew. I one thing I will say that I will put it this way. I will be surprised if he doesn't bring in a new defensive coordinator. And that's not to like throw any shade at the guys that were running DC before, and Bobby April and Andy Thompson. They were both co-DCs, but I would expect there to be a new defensive coordinator brought in. Only reason I say that is just like, I don't know. It's sort of a situation where it's like you're kind of starting over here a little bit, bringing in a fresh face, a fresh guy at DC would probably make sense for them. That being said, given how the defense succeeded, um, here's I'll put it this way: like with the defensive coordinator situation, Bobby April III was the defensive coordinator under Troy Taylor for the first 2 seasons, and then before Troy Taylor was let go, Andy Thompson, who was the previous head coach at Sac State, where Troy Taylor was and who we knew, came on to be co-defensive coordinator with April. Troy Taylor then gets fired. So Andy Thompson, who was there just because Troy Taylor brought him along, he's there now without his best friend Troy Taylor as the head coach. So I mean, and so it was sort of a weird kind of deal where it was like, how is this going to work? And the reason why Thompson's here is because Taylor brought him in, but now Taylor's gone. So I don't know. I think like I certainly would be. I certainly would not be at all surprised. Put it that way. It's just that there's a fresh slate at defensive coordinator. I don't see them keeping the co DC thing going into next year. It would just be, I don't know. It's just you don't see that normally. So I think defensive coordinator is a big thing to look for. But I gotta say, as of now, there's not been a lot of new developments, so it's just kind of TBD to be determined. But that will be very interesting to see what directions Tavita does in terms of rounding out his staff, because I do think people that are optimistic about Tavita, I think one of the things they want to see is that he surrounds himself with a really good coaching staff, given that he's kind of greener, we'll just say, in terms of head coaching experience. He's never done it. So,
Yeah, 100%. That was one of my question marks when I was kind of thinking about Pritchard, because I thought at first maybe they would give Jason Garrett a call, especially since he was the finalist back when they hired
yeah.
Troy Taylor. But, one of the scenarios that I kind of ran through my head is, if I were Stanford, why not give Justin Wilcox a call? I know he would be kind of a Benedict Arnold since he was just at Cal, but I'm like, to me, he would be the perfect guy to be able to run that defense. And, somebody, before he took the Cal job, he did a phenomenal job at Tennessee. So and Oregon as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if, that's just a name I kind of threw out there and thought about.
No, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be great. I don't know if he would necessarily want to cross over, but then again, it's like, you know what? It's like a lot of people have done it, and it's like if Stanford offers him enough money, like, I mean, and Cal fired him too, so I don't know how he feels about that. It's sort of like, he recruited JKS to Cal, and yeah, I mean, sir, I'll put it this way: if I'm Stanford, I would certainly give Justin Wilcox a call. That's a great idea.
Yeah, 100%. Because I just hope whatever they do, just someone get who's a veteran and someone that can kind of just take complete command of the defense, and then Pritchard can kind of handle just kind of being the CEO, get the
Yeah,
offense rolling, and kind of go from there.
that's really what makes the most sense, just